An anime-obsessed introvert turned into a cold-blood killer, a woman whose crimes were even too gruesome for the darkest corners of the web. A man so magnetic, he convinced others to do the unthinkable, even to their own children. And another who stalked forums and chat rooms, hunting for his next victim. Let me explain. Some people are born into darkness. Others invited in. And some become something far worse. We all know the stories, the ones whispered in hushed tones, the ones that send chills down your spine. But what if the most terrifying monsters aren't the ones lurking in the shadows, but those walking among us in broad daylight? For centuries, we've searched for answers. What makes a person capable of unspeakable horror? Is evil born from trauma, a mind twisted by pain until it fractures? Or is there something more, something ancient, lurking just beyond our understanding? Some believe that darkness festers in the wounded, shaping them into reflections of their torment. Others argue that true malevolence isn't created, it is awakened. Perhaps there are forces beyond comprehension, unseen entities whispering to those teetering on the edge. These forces do not need to be shaped by human suffering, they merely need a host, someone willing, consciously or not, to let them in. And once inside, they take root, transforming their vessel into something monstrous. Japan, a land steeped in folklore, has long told stories of spirits and demons that prey on human darkness, forces that feed on hatred, fear, and suffering. Legends warn of those who become possessed, their souls overtaken, reshaped into something unrecognizable. But what if true evil doesn't come from the outside? What if the darkest parts of the human psyche are not just our own, but reflections of something far older, something waiting in the shadows? Tonight, we explore 4 of Japan's most disturbing criminals, individuals whose crimes defy explanation. Were they merely victims of their own darkness, or was something else at play? As we dive deeper, we must ask, was there evil born of human nature, or was it something far more sinister? Some say the shadows of the human mind are just shadows. But what if they are doors, waiting to be opened? And what if, beyond them, lies something far more terrifying than we ever imagined? Before we get into the first story, I want to thank you all for supporting the channel, and if you haven't yet, please make sure to subscribe. Welcome to the Glimp. Tsutomu Miyazaki was born on August 21, 1962, in the Sujinami district of Tokyo in Japan. From a young age, he was described as an intelligent, though reclusive child. His parents were both well-educated, with his father working as a professor and his mother being highly involved in his upbringing. However, despite the apparent stability at home, Miyazaki's childhood was far from normal. One of the most notable aspects of Miyazaki's early life was a congenital condition. He was born with a deformity that caused his hands to be unusually small and underdeveloped. His hands were so deformed that they made him physically different from other children, leading to bullying and social isolation. This rejection likely played a significant role in his development of antisocial behavior and a growing sense of alienation. His classmates avoided him. His family resented him. And because of this he turned inward, retreating into a world of horror manga and grotesque fantasies, where pain was power, and suffering was an art form. As he was growing older he started to become more and more obsessed with these dark fantasies and terrifying ideas, and unfortunately at some point, he started living out his fantasies. Fantasies that turned into crimes, that would shock even the most hardened investigators. Between 1988 and 1989, when he was 26 years old, he did some of the most horrific things a human could possibly do. He kidnapped and murdered 4 young girls, all between the ages of 4 and 7. And he didn't just take their lives, he played with their remains, defiled them, and on top of that, he recorded it all. But what disturbed the public most wasn't the brutality. It was the letters. Miyazaki sent letters to the victims' families, explaining them in grotesque detail what he had done, enjoying their sorrow and pain. In one of these letters, he wrote, "Now, I am in your nightmares." When police raided his home they found his private sanctuary, a collection of thousands of violent anime tapes, horror movies, and a disturbing array of photographs. And among them, one image stood out, a hand-drawn creature, humanoid but grotesque, with bulging eyes and jagged teeth. When he was asked about it, Miyazaki simply smiled and whispered, "Rat Man." Apparently, to Miyazaki, Rat Man was real. He described it as a presence that guided him, a voice in his head that grew louder with each crime. It laughed when he killed. It whispered secrets of pain and power. Some believe Rat Man was nothing more than a manifestation of his fractured mind, a symbol of his detachment from reality. But others, those who understand Japan's long history of spirits and possessions, tell a different theory. Was Rat Man a delusion? Or was it something ancient, something that found a lonely, twisted boy and made him its vessel? Miyazaki's reign of terror lasted from 1988 to 1989, when he was finally apprehended after a series of murders. His arrest was made possible when investigators linked his fingerprints to those found at one of the crime scenes. He was convicted for the murders on the 4 young girls, though it is suspected that he may have been responsible for other deaths as well. Miyazaki was sentenced to death and executed on June 17, in 2008, his final words cryptic and chilling. "I will return." And to this day, those who visit the site of his childhood home report strange occurrences, low whispers in the wind, shadowy figures that vanish when approached. As if something is still waiting. Tsutomu Miyazaki's descent into darkness was deeply intertwined with his obsession with otaku culture, a subculture in Japan that is primarily characterized by a love for anime, manga, video games, and other forms of Japanese pop culture. While the otaku culture itself is not inherently violent or harmful, Miyazaki's particular engagement with it was marked by a disturbing fixation on violent, dark themes. This culture, often seen as an escape for many from the mundane or painful realities of life, became the breeding ground for his twisted fantasies and violent tendencies. Hiroshi Maeue was born in 1969 in Yokohama, Japan. Little is known about his early life, but what is clear is that he exhibited disturbing traits from an early age. By the time he became an adult, just like Miyazaki, Maeue had a history of social isolation, a lack of empathy, and emotional detachment, all of which were key elements of his eventual crimes. Understanding his loner lifestyle, it was obvious why Hiroshi did not roam the streets. Instead, he hunted online, in his comfort zone. He was a predator in a digital world, preying on the lost and the broken. Roaming on suicide forums, he searched, and eventually found his victims, people already living on the edge, looking for an escape, willing to meet a stranger in the night, to make their pain disappear forever. But Hiroshi had no intention of dying alongside them. He lured his victims in with promises of a painless end, only to strangle them with his bare hands, watching as the life faded from their eyes. His joy wasn't in the act of killing itself but in the process, the moment when the soul of his victim finally broke, when they realized they were not free but trapped in his grip. Psychologists diagnosed him as a sadistic predator, a man who could only derive pleasure from death and suffering. His demeanor was unsettling. He showed no remorse, no guilt, just a chilling, cold smile, as though he were beyond human understanding, as if he was haunted. It was as if the act of taking life wasn't just a pleasure for him, but a compulsion, a need driven by something darker. What's more disturbing is the reports from the families of his victims. They claimed that after their loved ones died, they began to experience strange occurrences, computers turning on by themselves, messages appearing on their screens long after the victim had passed, as if their loved ones were trying to reach out. Some claimed they could hear their deceased relatives typing late at night, as if trapped between worlds, still haunted by the killer who had claimed their lives. We will never truly know if he was really haunted, or if he was so skilled in the digital landscape, that he programmed all this stuff to happen. Was he simply another monster hiding behind a screen? Or was there something more to the voices he sought out? The ones that called to him from the darkness, begging to be taken. Something ancient, perhaps. Something that existed not in the physical realm but in the digital ether, where souls could be trapped, tortured, and manipulated in ways unimaginable. His capture came about when police were able to trace the identity of one of his victims through digital forensics. They discovered that he had corresponded with the victim through the suicide website, and through further investigation, they were able to connect him to the murders. He was arrested in 2005 and charged with the deaths of 3 people. During his trial he showed zero remorse, and he seemed indifferent to the gravity of his crimes. His demeanor was cold, and he showed little emotion when confronted with the families of his victims. Hiroshi's lack of empathy and his twisted rationalization of his actions, claiming that he helped his victims by offering them an escape, was deeply unsettling. Because of this he was sentenced to death by the Japanese court. And as of now, he remains on death row, though it is not clear exactly when his execution will take place, as Japan's death penalty system involves long periods of time on death row before execution. Some killers use knives. Others use guns, and some people even use their bare hands to take a life. But Futoshi Matsunaga had a very different approach. He used words. Being a master of manipulation, he didn't need to kill, he simply convinced others to do his dirty jobs for him. Futoshi Matsunaga was a charismatic con artist, and because of this he was able to build his own cult, drawing victims into his web, slowly stripping away their identities, and breaking them down piece by piece. But his crimes were not quick. They were drawn-out performances of suffering, psychological torture that took a lot of time to unfold, I'm talking about years. He forced entire families to commit unspeakable acts in the name of obedience to him. Parents were compelled to kill their own children, and lovers were told to murder each other. He enjoyed their pain, laughing as he erased their humanity, and with each death he peeled away another layer from their souls. This guy was truly horrible. For Matsunaga his victims were not just people, they were vessels to be controlled. He used his powers of persuasion to strip away their sense of self and replace it with a twisted devotion to his cause. His methods were so effective that even those who managed to escape never fully broke free from his control. Many of them reported strange, almost supernatural occurrences after they left him. Mysterious accidents. Unexplained illnesses. Nightmares that stretched into waking hours. Was this guy playing with the supernatural? At every crime scene, investigators found strange symbols, markings on the walls, crude carvings in furniture, and words written in blood. They seemed meaningless at first, and although it's cruel, they are things that have been seen before. But when examined closely, they bore eerie similarities to ancient protection sigils, symbols used to ward off spirits or, in some cases, to summon them. Was Matsunaga simply a master manipulator? Or did he tap into something far older, something more sinister? Was he, like so many others, merely a vessel for something dark and ancient, something that fed on the suffering of others as much as he did? Miyuki Ishikawa never raised a knife, never fired a gun, and yet she is one of the deadliest killers in Japanese history. A midwife by profession, she oversaw the births of countless children. But she also decided which ones would live, and which would not. In post-war Japan, poverty was rampant, and the strain of economic hardship weighed heavily on families. Resources were scarce, and many simply could not afford to feed another mouth. Ishikawa, working in a government-run maternity hospital, began to see herself as a savior, a woman who would spare these families from the burden of having another child to care for. But her mercy was cruel. She would let newborns starve or abandon them to the cold, watching as life slipped away from the fragile bodies she was meant to protect. By the time she was caught, the number of her victims was estimated to be in the hundreds. And yet, Ishikawa showed no remorse. She never once doubted her actions, insisting that the children she had taken were never meant to live, that she was helping society by keeping the population under control. Even now, visitors to the hospital where she once worked report strange occurrences, faint cries echo in empty hallways, shadows flicker where no one stands. Some say the children she abandoned are still there, still waiting for the mother who never came. The air grows unnaturally cold in certain rooms, and the sounds of small, shuffling footsteps can be heard at night. There's an unsettling theory that Ishikawa's actions were driven by more than just cruelty. Some believe that she had unknowingly become a vessel for something darker, a force that had influenced her actions in ways that went beyond human understanding. In Japan, the spirits of the unburied are known to be vengeful, and some say the souls of the children she condemned to death now roam the halls of that hospital, seeking revenge. Evil is not always loud. Sometimes, it lingers in the spaces between reality and nightmare. It waits, watches, and chooses its next host. Some say these killers were simply broken minds, twisted by their own darkness. But others believe something else whispered to them. Something ancient. Something that is still out there. Perhaps it is nothing more than legend, a story to scare ourselves into believing we are safe. But consider this, every culture has its demons. In Japan, there are tales of spirits who feed on human suffering, of creatures who whisper in the minds of the vulnerable and twist them into something monstrous. There are stories of vengeful ghosts who return from the afterlife to exact their own brand of justice, or demons who seek out the weak, the broken, and the lost. If you stare into the abyss long enough, sometimes, it stares back. But what if the abyss is not just a reflection of our own fears? What if it is alive, watching us, waiting for the right moment to strike? Could it be that evil is not merely a product of human depravity, but something older, more insidious, something that exists beyond our understanding? Maybe we'll never know for sure. But if you feel a chill as you walk through the streets at night, if you hear a faint whisper when no one is there, don't look back. Sometimes, the shadows are not just a trick of the light. Sometimes, they are waiting for you to take a step too far.